The wagon wheel cracked clean through on a rutted stretch of prairie just outside Yankton, South Dakota, and Hannah Wright knew with absolute certainty that this was the moment everything would fall apart. She stood there in the merciless August sun of 1876, staring at the broken wheel while her 3-year-old twin boys wailed in the wagon bed behind her, and felt the weight of complete and utter aloneness settle over her shoulders like a shroud. Her husband Thomas had been dead for 2 months, taken by fever so quick she barely had time to understand he was dying before he was gone. And now she was stranded on this God-forsaken road, with no family, no money beyond the few coins in her pocket, and 2 babies who needed her to be strong when she had nothing left to give. She pressed her palms against her eyes, willing herself not to cry, not to give in to the desperation clawing at her chest. The boys needed water. They needed shade. They needed so many things she could not provide, and the realization that she might actually lose them, that her own inadequacy might cost her children their lives, made her want to scream into the vast emptiness of the Dakota prairie. That was when she heard the hoofbeats. Hannah's head snapped up, her heart hammering as a rider appeared on the horizon, moving toward her at an easy canter. She instinctively moved closer to the wagon, positioning herself between her children and whatever was coming. Out here, a lone woman was vulnerable in ways that made her stomach turn, and she had no weapon, no protection, nothing but her own body between her boys and danger. The rider drew closer, and she could make out more details. A man, tall in the saddle, wearing a worn brown hat, pulled low against the sun. He sat his horse like he was born to it, moving with the animal rather than against it. And as he approached, he raised one hand in a gesture that seemed meant to be peaceful. "Madam," he called out when he was close enough, slowing his horse to a walk. "Looks like you have got some trouble there." Hannah straightened her spine, lifted her chin. "The wheel broke. We will manage." The man brought his horse to a stop a respectful distance away and swung down from the saddle with fluid grace. He was younger than she had first thought, maybe 25 or 26, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that curled at his collar. His eyes, when they met hers, were a startling shade of blue-green, and there was something in his face that made her think of kindness, though she barely trusted her own judgment anymore. "Benjamin Lawson," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "I work the cattle ranch about 5 miles west of here, and begging your pardon, madam, but you are not going to manage this on your own. That wheel is done for." "I have money," Hannah said quickly, though it was not really true. She had a few dollars, not nearly enough for a new wheel. "If you could direct me to the nearest town where I might find a wheelwright." Benjamin stepped closer to examine the wheel, and Hannah noticed the way he moved, careful and deliberate, like he was trying not to spook her. He crouched down, ran his hand over the splintered wood, then stood and shook his head. "Yankton is your closest town, about 6 miles east. But madam, I do not think this wagon is going anywhere even if you get a new wheel. The axle is cracked too, and the whole rig looks about ready to fall apart." He paused, seemed to be weighing his words. "How long have you been traveling?" "That is not your concern," Hannah said, but her voice came out weaker than she intended. Behind her, one of the twins let out a particularly pitiful wail, and she turned instinctively, reaching into the wagon to soothe him. When she turned back, Benjamin was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. His eyes moved from her face to the children, then to the wagon with its patched canvas and rickety construction, and she saw the moment understanding dawned. "You are alone?" he said quietly. It was not a question. Hannah's throat tightened. "My husband died. I was traveling to my sister in Omaha, but I received word 2 weeks ago that she passed as well. Cholera." She did not know why she was telling him this, except that she was so tired of carrying it all herself. "I have no family. I was trying to make it to Yankton to find work, but now..." She could not finish the sentence. Now she had nothing. Now she was stranded with 2 babies and no prospects and no hope. Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, and Hannah braced herself for him to offer empty platitudes, or, worse, to ride away and leave them there. Instead, he took off his hat, ran a hand through his hair, and said something that made her heart stop. "I have got room for all 3 of you." Hannah stared at him. "What?" "At the ranch," Benjamin said, meeting her eyes directly. "We are always needing help. The foreman's wife does the cooking and cleaning, but she has been saying for months that it is too much for one woman. You could work there, earn your keep. There is a small cabin that is not being used. It is not much, but it has a roof and a stove, and it is dry. You and your boys could stay there." "I do not understand," Hannah said slowly. "You do not know me. You do not know anything about me." "I know you are trying to take care of your children," Benjamin said simply. "I know you are in trouble and need help. And I know I have got the means to help you, so it seems like the right thing to do." He put his hat back on, adjusted it. "No strings attached, madam. You work, you get paid, and a place to live. That is all." Hannah wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. But she had learned the hard way that nothing came without a price, that kindness from strange men was rarely as simple as it seemed. "Why would you do this?" she asked, and she hated how desperate she sounded. "What do you want from me?" Something flickered across Benjamin's face, something that might have been pain. "My mother died when I was young," he said quietly. "My father tried to raise me and my sister alone, but it was hard. People helped us when they did not have to. I figure I owe it to pass that kindness along." He paused. "I am not asking for anything except honest work, madam. You have my word on that." Hannah looked at her children, both of them red-faced and miserable in the heat, then back at this stranger who was offering her salvation. She had no other options. She could refuse and try to make it to Yankton on foot with 2 toddlers in tow, hope she found work before her money ran out and they starved. Or she could trust him. "All right," she said, and the words felt like stepping off a cliff. "All right, thank you." Benjamin nodded once, crisp and businesslike, then moved toward the wagon. "Let me get your things loaded onto my horse. The ranch is not far. We can send someone back for the wagon later, see if any of it can be salvaged." He worked quickly and efficiently, pulling out the few bags that contained everything Hannah owned in the world. It was pathetic, really, how little there was. Some clothes, a few cooking implements, a quilt her mother had made that was the only thing she had left of her family. Benjamin handled it all carefully, lashing the bags to his saddle, then turned to her. "Can you ride?" "Yes," Hannah said, though it had been years. "Good. You can ride with one of the boys. I will carry the other." He stepped closer to the wagon. "May I?" Hannah nodded and watched as Benjamin reached in and lifted out one of her sons with surprising gentleness. The boy, James, stopped crying immediately and stared at Benjamin with wide, curious eyes. "Hey there, little man," Benjamin said softly. "You are all right. We are going to get you out of this heat, get you some water. How does that sound?" James stuck his thumb in his mouth, still staring, and Benjamin smiled. It transformed his whole face, made him look younger and more approachable, and Hannah felt something in her chest shift slightly. She climbed into the wagon and scooped up Henry, her other son, then let Benjamin help her down. His hand was calloused and strong, his grip steady, and she tried not to think about how long it had been since anyone had touched her with simple kindness. Benjamin mounted his horse with James settled in front of him, then reached down to help Hannah up. She settled behind him, Henry clutched against her chest, and tried not to notice the solid warmth of Benjamin's back, the way he smelled like leather and sage and something clean and masculine. "Hold on," he said, and urged the horse into a walk. They rode in silence for a while, the prairie stretching out endlessly around them. The heat was oppressive, the sun beating down without mercy, but there was something almost peaceful about the rhythm of the horse's gait, the vast openness of the landscape. Hannah had been so focused on survival for so long that she had forgotten to notice beauty. But there was something about this place, something about the way the grass rippled in the wind and the sky seemed to go on forever. That made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she could breathe again. "How old are your boys?" Benjamin asked after a while. 3, Hannah said. "Just turned 3 last month. James is older by about 10 minutes. He likes to lord it over Henry." Benjamin chuckled. "I bet he does. They seem like good kids." "They are," Hannah's voice caught. "They are the only good thing in my life right now." "Then we will make sure they stay safe," Benjamin said, and there was such quiet certainty in his voice that Hannah almost believed him. The ranch came into view gradually, first just a dark smudge on the horizon, then resolving into buildings and fences and the distant shapes of cattle. It was bigger than Hannah had expected, more established. A large main house sat at the center, with a barn and several outbuildings scattered around it. Beyond that, she could see the vast expanse of pasture land, dotted with grazing cattle. "This is the Broken Arrow Ranch," Benjamin said as they approached. "Been here about 15 years. We run about 3,000 head of cattle, supply beef to Yankton and the mining camps up in the Black Hills. The owner, Mr. Carson, is a good man, fair employer, you will like him." They rode into the yard, and immediately several men looked up from their work. Hannah felt their eyes on her, assessing, curious, and she lifted her chin and stared straight ahead. She had nothing to be ashamed of. Benjamin dismounted and lifted James down, then helped Hannah and Henry down as well. A woman emerged from the main house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was in her 40s, with graying blonde hair and a weather-worn face that softened when she saw the children. "Benjamin," she said, her eyes questioning, "who have you brought us?" "This is Mrs. Wright and her sons, James and Henry," Benjamin said. "Their wagon broke down on the eastern road. I told her we could use help with the housework, that she could stay in the empty cabin." The woman's eyes sharpened, and Hannah could see her taking in the situation, understanding immediately what Benjamin was not saying, that Hannah was destitute, that she was desperate, that this was charity dressed up as employment. "I can work," Hannah said quickly before the woman could speak. "I am a good cook. I can clean, mend, do laundry. Whatever you need, I will earn my keep, I promise." The woman studied her for a long moment, then smiled. "I am Martha, the foreman's wife, and Lord knows I could use the help. Benjamin is right about that." She stepped forward, her expression warming. "You look exhausted, dear. Why do not we get you and those babies settled, get some food in you, and we can talk about the particulars later." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes at the simple kindness, but she blinked them back. "Thank you." "Come on then," Martha said, gesturing for Hannah to follow. "Benjamin, bring their things to the cabin, would you? I am going to take Mrs. Wright to the kitchen first. Get these little ones some milk and cookies." Benjamin nodded, and as Martha led Hannah away, she glanced back to see him watching her, his expression thoughtful. Then he turned and gathered up their bags, and Hannah forced herself to focus on putting one foot in front of the other. The kitchen was blissfully cool after the heat outside, and Martha immediately set about pouring milk for the boys and setting out a plate of sugar cookies. James and Henry fell on the food like they were starving, which they nearly were, and Hannah had to fight the urge to cry at the sight of them eating. "When did they last have a proper meal?" Martha asked gently. "Yesterday morning," Hannah admitted. "I have been rationing what little food we had left." Martha made a soft sound of sympathy and immediately began pulling out more food: bread, cheese, cold chicken, apple pie. She set it all in front of Hannah with a no-nonsense efficiency that brooked no argument. "You eat," Martha said firmly. "You cannot take care of those boys if you are running on empty yourself." Hannah wanted to argue, wanted to maintain some shred of dignity, but her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl, and Martha just raised an eyebrow. So, Hannah ate, and it was the best meal she had had in months. Real food, cooked with care, and enough of it that she did not have to worry about where the next meal would come from. "How did your husband die?" Martha asked after a while, her voice gentle. "A fever," Hannah said, around a mouthful of bread. "It came on fast. One day he was fine. 3 days later, he was gone. We did not have money for a doctor." She paused. "We never had much money. Thomas tried, but he was not good with work. He had big ideas but no follow-through. We were always just scraping by." Martha nodded, understanding in her eyes. "And your family?" "My parents died when I was 16. My sister was all I had left, and now she is gone too." Hannah set down her fork, suddenly unable to eat any more. "I have nobody. It is just me and the boys." "Well, you have got us now," Martha said firmly. "This is a good place, Mrs. Wright. We take care of our own here. You work hard, you will be treated fair, and those babies of yours will be safe and fed. That is a promise." Hannah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They finished eating, and then Martha led Hannah out of the main house and across the yard to a small cabin set back from the other buildings. It was rough, just 2 rooms with a stone fireplace and a packed dirt floor, but it had a real roof and glass windows and a door that locked. To Hannah, it looked like a palace. Benjamin was inside, setting down their bags. He had already started a fire in the fireplace, and the cabin was warming up nicely despite the heat outside. There was a narrow bed in one corner, a rough table with 2 chairs, and a rocking chair by the fire. Simple, but clean. "I brought some extra blankets from the bunkhouse," Benjamin said, gesturing to a pile on the bed. "And Martha will bring over some dishes and such. If you need anything else, just let me know." "This is more than enough," Hannah said, her voice thick. "I cannot thank you enough, Mr. Lawson." "Benjamin," he corrected gently. "And you do not need to thank me. Just do your work and take care of your boys. That is thanks enough." He tipped his hat to her and headed for the door, but paused on the threshold. "Mrs. Wright, I know today has been hard, but things are going to get better. I promise you that." Then he was gone, and Hannah was alone with her children in their new home. She sank down into the rocking chair, pulled both boys into her lap, and for the first time in months, let herself hope. The next weeks passed in a blur of work and routine. Hannah threw herself into her new job with fierce determination, desperate to prove that Benjamin had not made a mistake in helping her. She rose before dawn to help Martha prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, spent her days cooking and cleaning and mending, and fell into bed exhausted every night. It was hard work, but it was honest work, and at the end of each week, Martha pressed coins into her hand that represented the first money Hannah had earned on her own. The boys thrived in the new environment. They had gone from wan and listless to rosy-cheeked and energetic, running around the yard and making friends with the ranch dogs. The cowboys were surprisingly gentle with them, letting them pet the horses and teaching them little cowboy songs. James in particular had become attached to one of the older ranch hands, a grizzled man named Pete who whittled little wooden animals for the boys in his spare time. And then there was Benjamin. Hannah told herself firmly that she was not thinking about Benjamin, but that was a lie. She thought about him constantly. He was everywhere on the ranch, always working, always moving, and she found herself tracking his presence without meaning to. She noticed the way he handled the horses with such patience and skill. She noticed how the other men respected him, how they looked to him for guidance, even though he was younger than most of them. She noticed the way he always had time to stop and talk to her boys, lifting them up to see over the corral fence or letting them sit on his saddle while it was on the fence rail. She noticed, too, the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not watching. There was something in his eyes, something warm and wondering, that made her heart beat faster, but Hannah pushed those thoughts away. She was a widow with 2 children and no prospects. Benjamin was young and unattached, and could have his pick of the available women in the territory. Whatever kindness he showed her was just that, kindness, nothing more. She could not afford to read more into it, could not afford to let herself feel anything for him. One evening in early September, Hannah was sitting on the cabin porch watching the boys play when Benjamin rode up. He swung down from his horse and walked over, his movements easy and relaxed. "Evening, Mrs. Wright," he said, touching his hat brim. "Mr. Lawson?" Hannah said, then caught herself. "Benjamin." He smiled at that, and she felt warmth bloom in her chest. "I was wondering if you might need some help building a proper bed for the boys. That blanket nest they have been sleeping in cannot be too comfortable." Hannah glanced at where James and Henry had been sleeping, curled up together in a pile of blankets near the fireplace. It kept them warm and safe, but Benjamin was right. They needed something better. "I could not ask you to do that," Hannah said. "You have already done so much." "You are not asking, I am offering," Benjamin said. "Besides, I like working with wood. It is peaceful." He paused. "If you do not mind the company, that is." Hannah knew she should say no, knew she should maintain distance, keep things professional, but she found herself nodding instead. "I would like that," she said softly. "Thank you." Benjamin grinned, and that night he came back with an armload of lumber and his tools. He worked while Hannah put the boys to bed, the sound of sawing and hammering a comforting backdrop. When she emerged from settling the twins, she found him crouched by the fireplace, fitting together a sturdy little bed frame sized perfectly for 2 small boys. "That is beautiful," Hannah breathed, coming closer. "It is just a bed," Benjamin said, but she could hear the pleasure in his voice. "But it will last them a good long while," built it solid. They worked together to fit a mattress tick that Martha had donated and fill it with fresh straw, then made it up with clean sheets. When they were done, they both stood back and admired their handiwork. "They are going to love it," Hannah said. "I hope so." Benjamin gathered up his tools, but he did not immediately leave. Instead, he stood there, looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch. "You are doing a real good job here, Hannah. Everyone says so. You should be proud." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it sent shivers down her spine. "I am trying," she said. "You gave me a chance when no one else would have. I will not let you down." "You could never let me down," Benjamin said, and there was such conviction in his voice that Hannah had to look away. "Why did you really help me that day?" she asked softly. the truth. Benjamin was quiet for a long moment. "I told you about my mother dying," he said finally. "What I did not tell you was that after she died, my father fell apart. Started drinking, could not hold down work. We were headed for real trouble. And then one day, a rancher gave my father a job, gave us a place to live, said he believed everyone deserved a second chance." He paused. "That rancher was Mr. Carson, the man who owns this ranch. He saved our family, gave my father a reason to get sober, gave us a future. When I saw you on that road with your boys, I saw my own mother, and I knew if someone did not help you, you were not going to make it." Hannah felt tears spill over, running hot down her cheeks. "I was not going to make it," she whispered. "Another day, maybe two, and I do not know what would have happened. You saved our lives, Benjamin." "Then I am glad I came along when I did," Benjamin said roughly. He reached out as if to touch her face, then seemed to think better of it and dropped his hand. "I should let you rest. It is late." He headed for the door, and Hannah heard herself call out, "Benjamin?" He turned back, and in the firelight, his eyes were very blue. "Yes?" "I am glad too," Hannah said, "that you came along." Benjamin smiled, soft and sweet, and then he was gone into the night. September gave way to October, and the prairie turned gold and amber. The work on the ranch intensified as they prepared for winter, and Hannah found herself busier than ever. But it was good work, satisfying work, and she fell into bed each night with the bone-deep satisfaction of knowing she had earned her place. Her relationship with Benjamin had shifted into something she could not quite define. They were not exactly friends, but they were more than employer and employee. He sought out her company, finding excuses to come by the cabin or to talk to her when she was working. They would stand together watching the sunset while the boys played, talking about everything and nothing. She learned that he was 24, just 2 years younger than she was, that he loved this land with a fierce passion that made his whole face light up, that he wanted to have his own ranch someday, to build something lasting, and she began to feel something she had not expected to feel again. Something warm and fluttering that lived in her chest and made her smile for no reason. Something that terrified her. One afternoon in late October, Hannah was hanging laundry when she heard shouting from the main yard. She dropped the shirt she was holding and ran toward the sound, her heart pounding. A small crowd had gathered near the barn, and as she pushed through, she saw Benjamin on the ground, his arm bent at an unnatural angle, his face white with pain. "What happened?" she demanded, dropping to her knees beside him. "Horse spooked," one of the ranch hands said. "Threw him hard. Think his arm is broken." Hannah's hands moved automatically, gently probing Benjamin's arm. He hissed in pain, but did not pull away. "We need to set this," she said, "and we need to do it now, before the swelling gets worse." "You know how to set a bone?" Pete asked skeptically. "My father was a doctor," Hannah said, which was not exactly true, but close enough. Her father had been a pharmacist, but he had taught her basic medical care. "I have done this before, but I need supplies, clean cloth, whiskey, and 2 straight pieces of wood for a splint." The men scattered to gather what she needed, and Hannah focused on Benjamin. His eyes were closed, his jaw clenched against the pain, and she reached out and took his good hand without thinking. "Look at me," she said softly, and his eyes opened. "This is going to hurt. I am not going to lie to you, but I am going to fix it, and you are going to be all right. Do you trust me?" "Yes," Benjamin said without hesitation, and the simple certainty of it made her heart ache. The men returned with supplies, and Hannah poured whiskey over her hands and Benjamin's arm, then gave him the bottle. "Drink," she ordered, and he obeyed, taking several long swallows. Then she positioned herself and looked at Pete. "Hold his shoulders," she said. "Keep him still." What followed was brutal and necessary. Benjamin bit down on a leather strap and made sounds of agony that would haunt Hannah's dreams. But she worked quickly and efficiently, feeling for the break and manipulating the bones back into alignment. When it was done, she splinted the arm securely and wrapped it in clean cloth, then sat back on her heels, shaking. "It is done," she said quietly. "You need to keep that arm immobilized for at least 6 weeks. No heavy work, no riding if you can help it." Benjamin was breathing hard, sweat pouring down his face, but he managed a weak smile. "Yes, madam." They got him to his feet and helped him to his bunk in the bunkhouse, and Hannah supervised as they settled him in. She made him drink more whiskey for the pain, then stayed with him as the other men drifted away, sitting in a chair beside his bunk. "You do not have to stay," Benjamin murmured, his words slightly slurred from the alcohol and pain. "You have got work to do." "Martha can handle it for an hour," Hannah said firmly. "I am not leaving you alone right now." Benjamin was quiet for a moment, then said, "You are something else, Hannah Wright. You know that?" Hannah felt her cheeks heat. "I just did what needed doing." "No," Benjamin said, his eyes intense despite his obvious pain. "You did more than that. You are always doing more than that. You take care of everyone around you, even when you are barely getting by yourself. You are strong and capable, and so damn brave it makes my chest hurt." Hannah could not breathe, could not think. "Benjamin." "I know I should not say it," Benjamin continued, as if she had not spoken. "I know you are not looking for this, that you have got enough to deal with. But I have to tell you, Hannah, I am falling in love with you. Hell, I think I started falling the moment I saw you standing by that broken wagon with your chin up and fire in your eyes, determined to protect your boys no matter what. And I know that is probably not what you want to hear, but I am apparently too full of whiskey to keep my mouth shut, so there it is." Hannah stared at him, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "You are in love with me?" "Yes," Benjamin said simply. "And before you tell me all the reasons why that is a terrible idea, I already know them. You have been through hell. You are still grieving. You have got 2 children to think about. You do not need some cowboy getting in the way of you building a life. But the thing is, Hannah, I do not want to get in the way. I want to be part of that life. I want to help you build it. I want to watch those boys grow up. I want to give you a home and a future and everything you deserve." Tears were streaming down Hannah's face now, and she could not have stopped them if she tried. "I am broken," she whispered. "My husband just died. I have nothing to offer you." "You are not broken," Benjamin said fiercely. "You are surviving. There is a difference, and you have everything to offer. You are everything, Hannah. You just cannot see it yet." Hannah wanted to believe him. God, she wanted it so badly. But fear held her back. The fear of losing someone else, of opening her heart only to have it shattered again. "I am scared," she admitted. "Me too," as Benjamin said. "But I am more scared of not taking the chance, of letting you slip away because I was too much of a coward to tell you how I feel." He reached out with his good hand and caught hers. "You do not have to say anything right now. You do not have to feel the same way. I just needed you to know." Hannah looked down at their joined hands, at the way his fingers wrapped around hers, strong and sure. And she realized in that moment that she did feel the same way. That somewhere in the past months, this kind, steadfast man had worked his way into her heart, that she loved him. "I am falling in love with you too," she said, the words barely a whisper. "I did not think I could feel this way again, but I do. You make me feel safe and seen and valued. You make me want to believe in the future again. And that terrifies me." Benjamin's whole face lit up, pain forgotten. "Hannah!" "But," Hannah continued quickly, "we have to be smart about this. We have to go slow. I have James and Henry to think about, and they have already lost so much. I cannot bring someone into their lives unless I am certain it is going to last." "I am certain," Benjamin said, "but I understand you need time. I can wait. I will wait as long as you need." Hannah leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss to his forehead, letting her lips linger there. "Thank you," she murmured against his skin, "for everything." She stayed with him until he fell asleep, the whiskey and exhaustion finally pulling him under, then slipped quietly out of the bunkhouse. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Hannah stood in the yard and let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened. Benjamin loved her, and she loved him. After everything she had lost, everything she had survived, she was being given a second chance at happiness. She was not going to waste it. The next weeks were a strange and wonderful time. Benjamin was frustrated by his forced inactivity, but Hannah visited him daily, bringing him meals and changing his bandages and simply keeping him company. They talked for hours, sharing stories about their pasts, their dreams for the future. She told him about her childhood, about the parents she had lost too young. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning to be a cowboy from the ground up, and slowly, carefully, she began to let him into the boys' lives in a more deliberate way. She would bring James and Henry to visit him, and Benjamin would tell them stories or teach them to play simple games. The twins adored him, calling him Mr. Ben, and climbing all over him despite his injury. And Benjamin was endlessly patient with them, never losing his temper even when they accidentally jostled his broken arm. One evening in mid-November, Hannah was sitting with Benjamin on the bunkhouse porch when he said, "I need to tell you something." Hannah tensed, bracing herself for bad news. "What is it?" "Mr. Carson is selling off part of the ranch," Benjamin said. 500 acres on the western edge. He is getting older, wants to downsize a bit, and he offered to sell it to me at a good price, let me pay it off over time. Hannah's heart leaped. "Benjamin, that is wonderful. Your own land, your own ranch. That is everything you have wanted." "It is," Benjamin agreed, "but it means building a house, starting from scratch. It is going to be hard work, and it will be a few years before I am really established." He paused, took her hand. "I know we are taking things slow. I know you are not ready for any big decisions, but I need you to know that when I think about building that house, when I picture my future, you are in it. You and James and Henry. I am building toward a life with you. Hannah, if you will have me." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. "You really mean that? You want to take on a widow with 2 children?" "I do not see it as taking on anything," Benjamin said. "I see it as gaining a family. Those boys are already like sons to me, Hannah, and you are the woman I want to spend my life with. So yes, I really mean it." Hannah thought about everything that had brought her to this moment, the loss and grief and desperate struggle, the broken wagon and the man who had stopped to help, the months of slowly rebuilding her life, of learning to hope again, and she thought about what it would mean to say yes, to tie her future to Benjamin's, to let herself be vulnerable again, to risk the pain of potential loss. But looking at Benjamin's earnest, open face, at the love shining in his eyes, she knew she had already made her choice. She had been making it all along, one day at a time, one moment at a time. "When you build that house," Hannah said softly, "I want you to build it with 4 bedrooms, 1 for us, 1 for the boys, and 2 more for the children we are going to have together. Because yes, Benjamin Lawson, yes, I will marry you. Yes, I want to build a life with you. Yes to all of it." Benjamin let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and pulled her into his arms, careful of his healing arm. "You just made me the happiest man in the Dakota Territory," he murmured against her hair. "Good," Hannah said, smiling through her tears, "because you have made me happier than I ever thought I could be again." They sat there on the porch as the stars came out, wrapped in each other's arms, and planned their future. They would wait until spring to marry, giving Benjamin time to heal and start building the house. Hannah would continue working at the ranch, saving her wages toward their new life, and when the house was ready, they would move in together as a family. It was not going to be easy. Building a homestead from scratch never was, but they would do it together, and that made all the difference. Winter came to the prairie, harsh and unforgiving, but the little cabin was warm and snug. Benjamin's arm healed slowly but surely, and by Christmas, he was back to light work. The holiday was a revelation for Hannah, the first one in years that had been truly joyful. The ranch families gathered in the main house for a feast, and there was music and dancing and laughter. Someone had donated a small pine tree, and they decorated it with strings of popcorn and paper stars. The boys were beside themselves with excitement, and Benjamin gave them each a hand-carved horse that he had been working on in secret. But the best gift came when Benjamin pulled Hannah aside and slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. "It was my mother's," he said quietly. "My father gave it to me before he died, told me to give it to the woman I wanted to spend my life with. I cannot think of anyone more deserving than you." Hannah looked down at the ring, tears blurring her vision. "It is perfect," she whispered. "You are perfect." "Far from it," Benjamin said with a laugh. "But I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to make you happy." "You already do," Hannah said, and kissed him softly. They announced their engagement on Christmas night, and the celebration that followed was raucous and joyful. Martha cried and hugged Hannah so hard she could barely breathe. Pete slapped Benjamin on the back and declared that he had done well for himself. Mr. Carson, the ranch owner, shook Benjamin's hand and told him he was proud of the man he had become. And through it all, Hannah felt a deep, abiding sense of rightness. This was her family now. These people, this place, this life. She had lost so much, But she had found something precious in the ashes. She had found home. The winter passed in a blur of preparation. Benjamin worked on the house whenever weather permitted, and on the worst days he stayed inside and drew up plans. Hannah spent her evenings sewing, making curtains and linens for their new home. The boys grew like weeds, becoming more articulate and independent with each passing day. They understood, in their child way, that something good was coming, that their little family was about to grow. By early March, the house was nearly finished. It was a sturdy structure built to withstand prairie winters and summer storms. 4 bedrooms, just as Hannah had requested, plus a large main room with a stone fireplace and a kitchen with a real cast-iron stove. Benjamin had even built a covered porch across the front, a place where they could sit on summer evenings and watch the sunset. Hannah visited the house nearly every day, watching it take shape, making it real in her mind. She would stand in the empty rooms and picture their life there. James and Henry running through the house, their laughter echoing off the walls, herself in the kitchen, cooking meals for her family, Benjamin coming in from the fields, tired but satisfied, ready to wrap his arms around her and tell her about his day. Maybe, someday, a baby crying in one of those extra bedrooms, a new life to add to their growing family. It was everything she had never dared to dream of, and it was almost within reach. They set the wedding for the first Saturday in April, a simple ceremony at the ranch with the minister from Yankton officiating. Hannah had no fancy dress, just a simple blue cotton gown that Martha helped her sew, but she felt beautiful in it. Benjamin wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed, and when he saw her walking toward him, his whole face lit up with such joy that Hannah felt her heart might burst. The ceremony was short and sweet. They exchanged vows in front of their small, gathered community, promising to love and honor each other for as long as they lived. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Benjamin kissed her with a tenderness that made her knees weak, and everyone cheered. The celebration afterward was everything a frontier wedding should be. There was music and dancing, a feast that Martha and Hannah had spent days preparing, and more joy than Hannah had thought possible. James and Henry, dressed in their new matching shirts, ran wild with the other children, their faces sticky with cake. Benjamin never left Hannah's side, his hand always finding hers, his eyes never leaving her face. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Benjamin leaned close and whispered, "Ready to go home, Mrs. Lawson?" Hannah smiled, loving the sound of her new name. "Yes, let us go home." They gathered up the boys, said their goodbyes, and made the short journey to their new house. Benjamin had arranged for someone to light the lamps and start a fire in the fireplace, and the house was warm and welcoming as they stepped inside. It smelled like fresh wood and new beginnings, and Hannah felt a sense of peace settle over her. They put the boys to bed together, tucking them into the bed Benjamin had built months ago. James and Henry were asleep almost before their heads hit the pillow, exhausted from the excitement of the day. Hannah kissed each of their foreheads, overwhelmed with love for these 2 little souls who had given her a reason to keep going when everything else was falling apart. Benjamin was waiting for her in the main room when she emerged, standing by the fireplace with a soft smile on his face. "Come here," he said, holding out his hand. Hannah went to him, let him pull her close. They stood there swaying gently, even though there was no music, just the 2 of them beginning their first night as husband and wife. "Thank you," Hannah whispered against his chest. "For what? For stopping that day? For seeing me when I needed to be seen? For giving me hope when I had none left? For loving me and my boys? For all of it?" Benjamin tilted her chin up so he could look into her eyes. "I should be thanking you. You came into my life and changed everything. You made me want to be better, do more, build something lasting. You gave me purpose, Hannah. You gave me a family. I am the lucky one here." "Then I guess we are both lucky," Hannah said, and kissed him. That night, in their own home, in their own bed, they truly became husband and wife, and it was everything Hannah had hoped for, and more. Benjamin was gentle and patient, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished. And when they finally came together, it felt like coming home, like 2 puzzle pieces finally slotting into place. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, and Benjamin traced patterns on her shoulder with his fingertips. "I love you," he murmured. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too," Hannah said, "and I'm not scared anymore, not with you beside me." They fell asleep like that, Wrapped in each other's arms, and for the first time in over a year, Hannah slept without nightmares. The months that followed were some of the happiest of Hannah's life. She threw herself into making their house a home, while Benjamin worked the land and built up their herd. It was hard work, the kind that left them both exhausted at the end of each day, but it was satisfying in a way nothing else had ever been. They were building something together, creating a legacy for their children. James and Henry thrived in their new environment. The endless prairie was their playground, and they spent their days exploring and getting into mischief. Benjamin was endlessly patient with them, teaching them about the land and the animals, letting them help with small tasks around the ranch. They called him Pa now, at Hannah's encouragement, and Benjamin's eyes always got a little misty when they said it. By midsummer, Hannah began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited a few more weeks to be certain, then told Benjamin one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He let out a whoop of joy, scooped her up and spun her around, then very carefully set her down and fretted that he might have hurt the baby. "The baby is fine," Hannah said, laughing. "You cannot break me, Benjamin." "I know," he said, pressing a hand to her still flat stomach with wonder. "But I am going to take care of you anyway. You and our child." "Our children," Hannah corrected. "I already have two, remember?" "Our children," Benjamin agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "All of them, our family." The pregnancy was easier than her first had been, perhaps because she was not struggling to survive this time. She had a home, a husband who doted on her, enough food to eat, and no worries about where they would be sleeping each night. Benjamin was ridiculously overprotective, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work, but Hannah insisted on maintaining her routine. She felt strong and healthy and gloriously happy. In December, as the first snows began to fall, she gave birth to a son. The labor was long but uncomplicated, with Martha attending as midwife and Benjamin pacing nervously in the next room. When it was over and Hannah held her new baby in her arms, she felt a rush of love so powerful it nearly overwhelmed her. "Come meet your son," she called out, and Benjamin practically fell through the door in his hurry. He approached slowly, reverently, staring at the tiny bundle in Hannah's arms with awe. "He is so small," Benjamin whispered. "He will grow," Hannah said with a tired smile. "They all do. What should we name him?" They had discussed names endlessly over the past months, but had not been able to agree. Now, looking at their son's small, perfect face, Benjamin said, "What about Thomas, after your first husband? He was their father, Hannah. He should be honored." Hannah felt tears well up. "You would do that?" "He gave me the greatest gift of my life when he gave you those boys," Benjamin said simply. "And I know you loved him. I am not threatened by that. So, yes, I think we should name our son Thomas." "Thomas Benjamin Lawson," Hannah said, testing out the full name. "It is perfect." James and Henry were fascinated by their new baby brother. They would stand by his cradle for hours, watching him sleep, arguing in whispers about who he looked like. Benjamin had to gently remind them not to poke the baby, that he was delicate and needed to be treated carefully. But there was no jealousy, only excitement about this new addition to their family. The winter of 1877 was harsh, but the little family weathered it together in their warm, sturdy house. There were days when the snow was so deep they could not leave the house at all, and Benjamin would read to the boys or play games with them while Hannah rocked baby Thomas by the fire. They were snug and safe and together, and that was all that mattered. Spring came eventually, as it always did, and with it came new growth. The cattle herd had survived the winter well, and Benjamin's careful management meant they were in good shape to sell come fall. He planted a garden near the house, teaching James and Henry how to prepare the soil and sow seeds. The boys were 4 now, old enough to be helpful, and they took their responsibilities seriously. Hannah watched her family grow and flourish and felt a contentment deeper than anything she had known. This life they had built, this home they had made, it was everything she had ever wanted and more. Yes, she still thought about Thomas sometimes, still felt a pang of grief for what they had lost. But she no longer felt guilty about being happy. She had survived, and in surviving, she had found something beautiful. One evening in late May, as they sat on the porch watching the boys play with baby Thomas, Benjamin said, "I have been thinking." "About what?" Hannah asked, leaning her head on his shoulder. "About expanding. We have done well these past 2 years, better than I expected. I think by next spring we could afford to buy more land, maybe hire some help. Really build this into something substantial." He paused. "What do you think?" "I think you can do anything you set your mind to," Hannah said, "and I will be right beside you, whatever you decide." Benjamin kissed the top of her head. "Have I told you lately that you are amazing?" "Not in the past hour or so," Hannah said with a smile. "Then I am slipping," Benjamin said. "You are amazing, Hannah Lawson. The best thing that ever happened to me." "The second best," Hannah corrected, gesturing to where James was showing Henry how to properly hold baby Thomas. "Those boys are pretty wonderful too." "Fair point," Benjamin agreed. "I am a lucky man." "We are both lucky," Hannah said, echoing the words from their wedding night. "Lucky to have found each other, lucky to have this life." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermal currents. The prairie stretched out endlessly in all directions, wild and beautiful and free. And Hannah Wright Lawson, who had once been a desperate widow with no family and no hope, felt completely and utterly at peace. She had found her place in the world. She had found her home, and she was never going to let it go. The years that followed were full of growth and change. Benjamin expanded the ranch just as he had planned, buying adjoining land and building up a respectable herd. They hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, young men from Yankton looking for honest employment. The house saw additions as well, a larger barn and several outbuildings, a chicken coop that the boys took responsibility for managing. In the fall of 1878, Hannah gave birth to another son, whom they named William. He was a chubby, happy baby who rarely cried and seemed content to observe the world with solemn brown eyes. James and Henry, now 5 years old, were old hands at being big brothers and helped Hannah care for the baby with surprising competence. Benjamin proved to be everything Hannah could have wanted in a husband and father. He was patient and kind, quick to laugh and slow to anger. He treated James and Henry exactly the same as he treated Thomas and William, never making a distinction between the boys he had sired and the boys he had adopted. To him, they were all his sons, and he loved them equally and without reservation. The ranch prospered under Benjamin's careful stewardship. He had a knack for knowing when to sell cattle and when to hold them, for understanding the rhythms of the market and the land. By 1880, they were one of the more successful small ranches in the area, with a reputation for quality beef and honest dealing. But success brought its own challenges. There were always people looking to take advantage, rustlers trying to steal cattle, unscrupulous buyers trying to cheat them on price. Benjamin handled it all with a steady calm that Hannah admired. He was not a violent man by nature, but he was not a pushover either. He knew how to stand his ground, how to protect what was his without looking for unnecessary trouble. One incident in particular stood out in Hannah's memory. A group of men from a larger ranch to the south had been grazing their cattle on Benjamin's land without permission, essentially stealing grass that he needed for his own herd. Benjamin had tried to handle it diplomatically, approaching the ranch owner to discuss the situation. But the man had been dismissive, suggesting that Benjamin was too small to matter, that he should be grateful for whatever scraps the bigger ranchers left him. Benjamin had come home that day with his jaw tight and his eyes hard, and Hannah had known immediately that something was wrong. She sent the boys outside to play and sat with him at the kitchen table while he told her what had happened. "I do not want trouble," Benjamin said, "but I cannot let them walk all over me either. If I do, every ranch in the territory will think they can use my land without consequence." "What are you going to do?" Hannah asked. "I am going to ride out there tomorrow with Pete and Sam," Benjamin said, referring to their 2 ranch hands. "And I am going to make it very clear that my land is my land, and if they want to use it, they are going to have to pay for grazing rights like everyone else." Hannah felt a cold knot of fear in her stomach. What if they do not listen? What if there is trouble? Benjamin reached across the table and took her hand. "I am not going to do anything stupid, Hannah. I am not going to start a fight, but I am also not going to back down. This ranch is our future, our children's inheritance. I have to protect it." "I know," Hannah said, squeezing his hand. "Just be careful. Come home to me." "Always," Benjamin promised. He rode out the next morning with Pete and Sam, all 3 of them armed but hoping not to need their guns. Hannah spent the day in a state of anxious tension, unable to focus on her work, jumping at every sound. The boys picked up on her mood and were unusually subdued, playing quietly and not fighting as much as usual. When Benjamin finally rode back into the yard just before sunset, Hannah ran out to meet him. He swung down from his horse and caught her in his arms, and she could feel the tension in his body. "What happened?" she asked. "We talked," Benjamin said. "Or rather, I talked and they listened. I explained that I was perfectly willing to negotiate grazing rights at a fair price, but that trespassing was not going to be tolerated." The ranch owner tried to bluster, but Pete had brought along some documentation showing exactly where our property lines were, and it was hard to argue with that. In the end, they agreed to pay a fee for the grass their cattle had already eaten, and to stay off our land unless we come to a formal agreement. "That is good," Hannah said, relief flooding through her. "That is really good, Benjamin." "It is," he agreed, but it was tense there for a bit. "I thought it might come to blows." He pulled back to look at her face. "I do not like worrying you like this, Hannah, but this is the reality of ranching out here. Sometimes you have to stand up and be counted." "I know," Hannah said, "and I am proud of you for handling it without violence. But I am also glad you are home safe." "Me too," Benjamin said, and kissed her soundly. Life continued its rhythm, seasons turning one into the next. In the spring of 1881, Hannah discovered she was pregnant again, and this time she gave birth to a daughter in early winter. They named her Sarah, and she was a revelation. After 4 boys, a girl seemed impossibly delicate and precious. Benjamin was absolutely besotted, declaring that she had him wrapped around her tiny finger from the moment she was born. The boys, now ranging in age from 7 to 3, were fascinated by their baby sister. James appointed himself her protector, while Henry wanted to hold her constantly. Thomas and William, still quite young themselves, were content to just stare at her in wonder. As the children grew, so did the ranch. By 1883, they had nearly tripled their original acreage and employed 5 full-time ranch hands. The house had been expanded again to accommodate their growing family, and they had built a proper bunkhouse for the employees. They were no longer struggling newcomers, but established members of the community, respected and valued. Hannah had found her place as well. She was known throughout the area as someone who could be counted on in a crisis, whether it was delivering a baby or nursing someone through illness. She had learned so much from her father, and now she put that knowledge to good use, helping her neighbors in whatever way she could. People came to her for advice, for medical care, for a sympathetic ear, and she gave generously of her time and skill. But her favorite role was still simply being a mother and wife. She loved the chaos of her busy household, loved the sound of her children's laughter, loved the quiet moments with Benjamin when the day was done and they could sit together and talk about everything and nothing. They had built something real and lasting, something that would outlive them both. One evening in the summer of 1884, as they celebrated their 8th wedding anniversary, Benjamin gave Hannah a gift. It was a small wooden box, beautifully carved, and when she opened it, she found a deed inside. "What is this?" she asked, confused. "The deed to the ranch," Benjamin said. "I had it redrawn to include your name. It is not just mine anymore, Hannah. It is ours. Everything we have built, we built together, and I want that to be official." Hannah stared at the document, tears welling up. In a time when women had few legal rights, when property almost always belonged solely to husbands, this was an extraordinary gesture. Benjamin was giving her security, autonomy, equality. "I do not know what to say," she whispered. "Say you will keep being my partner in all of this," Benjamin said. "Say you will keep building this life with me. That is all I want." "Yes," Hannah said through her tears. "Yes, always." They made love the night with a tenderness and passion that had only deepened over the years, and Hannah felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the man she had married. He saw her, truly saw her, in a way no one else ever had. He valued her not just as a wife and mother, but as a partner, an equal, someone whose contributions mattered. The children continued to grow, each developing their own distinct personality. James was serious and responsible, already showing signs of becoming the kind of steady, reliable man his stepfather was. Henry was the dreamer, always off exploring or inventing elaborate games. Thomas was quiet and thoughtful, preferring books to physical activity. William was the charmer, able to talk his way out of trouble with a smile. And Sarah, now 3 years old, was equal parts sweet and stubborn, wrapping everyone around her little finger. In 1885, Hannah gave birth to another son, whom they named Matthew. He was their sixth child, and Hannah joked that they were well on their way to having their own ranch crew. Benjamin just laughed and said he was perfectly happy with however many children they were blessed with. The house was constantly full of noise and activity. There were meals to cook and clothes to mend and lessons to teach. Hannah homeschooled the older boys, teaching them reading and arithmetic and history, while Benjamin taught them ranching skills. They were raising their children to be capable and self-sufficient, to understand the value of hard work and honest dealing. But they also made sure there was time for joy. Sunday afternoons were for picnics by the creek. Summer evenings were for catching fireflies. Winter nights were for gathering around the fire and telling stories. They were building memories, creating a childhood for their children that would sustain them through whatever hardships life might bring. As the years passed, Hannah sometimes thought about the woman she had been when she first arrived in Yankton, desperate and alone and terrified. She barely recognized that person anymore. The Hannah of 1876 had been hollowed out by grief and struggle, held together by sheer, stubborn will. The Hannah of 1886 was strong and confident and deeply happy. She had found herself in this life, had discovered reserves of strength and capability she never knew she possessed. And through it all, Benjamin had been her rock. He had never once made her feel less than, never tried to diminish her or control her. He celebrated her successes, supported her through her struggles, and loved her with a constancy that still took her breath away. They had grown together, their love deepening and maturing with each passing year. One evening in the fall of 1886, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Benjamin said, "Do you ever regret it? Staying here, I mean? Building this life with me instead of going somewhere else, starting fresh on your own terms?" Hannah turned to look at him, surprised by the question. "Not even once," she said firmly. "This is exactly where I'm supposed to be, with you, with our children, on this land. I have never been happier than I am right now." Benjamin smiled, that slow, sweet smile that always made her heart skip a beat. "Good, because I plan on keeping you for at least another 50 years. "Only 50? Hannah teased. "I was hoping for at least 60. "Deal," Benjamin said, and pulled her close. They sat there as the stars came out, comfortable in the silence that only comes from years of knowing each other deeply. The sounds of their children drifted out from the house, arguing over some game, and Hannah smiled. This was her life, this messy, chaotic, beautiful life, and she would not trade it for anything in the world. The ranch continued to prosper through the late 1880s. Benjamin's reputation as a fair dealer and skilled rancher meant they always had buyers for their cattle, and the steady income allowed them to make improvements and investments. They added irrigation to improve grazing, built better fencing, purchased breeding stock to improve their herd quality. The older boys were becoming real help now. James, at 15, could do the work of a full-grown man. Henry, at 14, had developed a talent for breaking and training horses. Thomas, at 12, kept meticulous records of the ranch's finances. They were good boys growing into good men, and both Hannah and Benjamin were proud of them. In 1888, another daughter joined the family. They named her Elizabeth, and she was as different from Sarah as two girls could be. Where Sarah was outgoing and bold, Elizabeth was shy and gentle. But the two girls adored each other from the start, and Sarah appointed herself Elizabeth's guardian and protector. Hannah was now 38 years old, mother to 7 children, and while she knew her childbearing years were likely coming to an end, she felt no sadness about it. She and Benjamin had been blessed beyond measure, and their family was complete. The children ranged in age from 16 to newborn, and the house was a constant whirlwind of activity. There were always meals to prepare, laundry to wash, disputes to settle, lessons to teach. But there was also laughter and love, and the deep satisfaction of watching her children grow into capable, caring human beings. James had developed a particular interest in veterinary care, often helping when cattle or horses fell ill. Henry spent every spare moment with the horses, developing an almost uncanny ability to understand them. Thomas talked about maybe becoming a lawyer someday, interested in the legal aspects of land ownership and property rights. William, at 7, was still young enough that his interests changed weekly, but he showed signs of having his father's head for business. Sarah, now 6, declared regularly that she was going to be a doctor like her mother, much to Hannah's delight. Matthew, at 3, was still mostly interested in following his older siblings around. And Elizabeth was too young to show any particular inclinations yet, but Hannah suspected she would be the artistic one, given how intently she studied everything around her. One day in the spring of 1889, a telegram arrived from Omaha. Hannah's hands shook as she opened it, memories of the last telegram she had received flooding back. But this one brought good news. A distant cousin she had not heard from in over a decade had died and left Hannah a small inheritance. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to make a difference. She showed the telegram to Benjamin that evening, and they discussed what to do with the money. They could put it toward more land or better stock or improvements to the house. But as they talked, Hannah found herself thinking about something else. "I want to use some of it to help other women," she said slowly. "Women like I was, desperate, alone, with nowhere to turn. I want to create some kind of fund or program that could provide them with what you provided me, a chance, a fresh start." Benjamin's eyes lit up. "That is a wonderful idea, Hannah. We could work with the church in Yankton, set up a system for identifying women in need and providing them with temporary housing and job training. Give them the tools to build a life." They spent weeks developing the plan, working with the minister and other community leaders. By summer, the Hannah Lawson Women's Fund was established, with enough money to help several women per year. It started small, but over time it would grow, helping dozens of women escape poverty and build better lives for themselves and their children. The day they officially announced the fund, Hannah stood in front of the small crowd gathered at the church and told her story. She talked about being widowed and alone, about the broken wagon wheel and the cowboy who had stopped to help. She talked about how one person's kindness had changed the trajectory of her entire life and how she wanted to pay that forward. There was not a dry eye in the church when she finished, and Benjamin stood beside her with his arm around her waist, proud and supportive. Several women approached her afterward, wanting to volunteer their time or donate money to expand the fund. It was the beginning of something meaningful, something that would outlast Hannah herself. As they drove home that evening, the children piled into the wagon bed behind them. Benjamin said, "You are remarkable, you know that?" "I am just trying to do some good," Hannah said. "It is more than that," Benjamin insisted. "You are taking your pain, your struggle, and turning it into something beautiful, something that will help people for years to come. That takes real strength of character." Hannah leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling contentment wash over her. "I learned from the best," she said. "You showed me what it means to help others without expecting anything in return. This is just me following your example." "Then we make a good team," Benjamin said, and kissed the top of her head. The 1890s brought new challenges and changes. The open range was disappearing, replaced by fenced pastures and more intensive management. But Benjamin adapted, always looking for ways to improve their operation while staying true to the principles that had guided them from the beginning: fair dealing, honest work, treating people with respect. The older boys were growing up and beginning to make their own way in the world. James decided to stay on the ranch, working alongside his father, and clearly being groomed to eventually take over. Henry left for a time to work on a horse ranch in Montana, learning new techniques and building his own reputation. Thomas went to Omaha to study law, determined to use his education to help ranchers protect their land rights. They were all making their parents proud, building on the foundation Hannah and Benjamin had laid. In 1893, Hannah gave birth to her 8th and final child, a son they named Daniel. She was 43 by then, and the pregnancy was harder than the previous ones had been. But Daniel was healthy and strong, and Hannah recovered well. Benjamin hovered over her for weeks afterward, and she had to finally order him to stop fussing and let her get back to her work. The house was still full of children, with Sarah now 12, William 10, Matthew 8, Elizabeth 5, and baby Daniel keeping everyone on their toes. It was chaos, but it was happy chaos, the kind that came from a home full of love and laughter. As Daniel grew from baby to toddler, Hannah found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this place. 20 years ago, she had been a desperate widow with 2 babies and no future. Now, she was a successful rancher's wife, mother to 8 children, and founder of a charity that had helped dozens of women build better lives. She had gone from having nothing to having everything that mattered. One evening in the summer of 1896, the whole family gathered for a celebration. James, now 24, had married a sweet girl from Yankton named Lucy, and they were expecting their first child. Hannah was going to be a grandmother, and the realization filled her with joy and a sense of the passage of time. They held the celebration at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed an army. Henry had come home from Montana for the occasion, and Thomas had taken the train from Omaha. All of Hannah's children were there, along with their extended family of ranch hands and neighbors and friends. It was a gathering that represented 20 years of building community, of investing in relationships, of creating something lasting. As the sun set and the party continued into the evening, Benjamin pulled Hannah aside and led her away from the crowd, out to a small rise where they could see the whole spread laid out below them. The house, the barn, the pasture stretching away to the horizon, their life, built from nothing, now solid and real and enduring. "Remember that day I found you on the road?" Benjamin asked quietly. "Every single day," Hannah said. "It was the day my life started again." "Mine too," Benjamin said. "I did not know it at the time, but that was the most important day of my life. The day I met the woman I would spend the rest of my life loving." Hannah turned to face him, seeing the gray that had begun to thread through his hair, the lines that 20 years of hard work and prairie sun had etched into his face. He was still the most handsome man she had ever seen, but more than that, he was good. Good all the way through, in a way that had never wavered in all their years together. "I love you," she said simply. "More than I can ever express. You saved me, Benjamin. You and this place and this life. You saved me." "We saved each other," Benjamin corrected gently. "You gave me purpose, Hannah. You gave me a reason to build something lasting. Before you, I was just drifting, doing my job, but not really living. You made me want more, want better, want to be worthy of you and those boys." "You were always worthy," Hannah said, her voice thick with emotion. They stood there as the stars came out, just as they had so many times over the years, and Hannah felt the weight of all they had built together. It had not been easy. There had been hard times, lean years, moments of fear and uncertainty, but they had weathered it all together, and their love had only grown stronger. "What do you think the next 20 years will bring?" Benjamin asked. "Grandchildren," Hannah said with a smile. "Lots of grandchildren, if I know our children. The ranch continuing to grow. Maybe some of the younger kids starting their own spreads nearby. A legacy that will last beyond us." "Sounds pretty good," Benjamin said. "It sounds perfect," Hannah agreed. They walked back to the party hand in hand, ready to rejoin their family. And as Hannah looked around at her children and the community they had built, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the broken wagon wheel that had stranded her on a Dakota road 20 years ago, because that breakdown had led to this breakthrough, this beautiful, messy, perfect life she never could have imagined. She caught James's eye across the yard, and he raised his glass to her with a smile. Her firstborn, who had been just a toddler when Benjamin found them, was now a man starting his own family. Henry was laughing with some of the ranch hands, probably telling stories about his adventures in Montana. Thomas was in deep conversation with some of the local ranchers, no doubt discussing legal matters, and the younger children were running wild, sticky with pie and drunk on the excitement of the celebration. This was her legacy. Not just the ranch or the land or the charity that bore her name, but this family, these people, this love that had multiplied and expanded to encompass so many. She had started with 2 babies and a broken wagon, and now she had this abundance, this joy, this life. Benjamin squeezed her hand, and she squeezed back, a silent communication that needed no words. They had made it. Against all odds, through all struggles, they had built something beautiful and lasting. And they had done it together. As the party wound down and the stars wheeled overhead, Hannah Lawson stood in the yard of her home and felt complete. The scared, desperate widow was gone, replaced by this woman who was strong and capable and deeply loved. The transformation had taken years, had required courage and faith, and the kindness of a stranger who became so much more. She looked up at Benjamin, her husband of 20 years, the father of her children, her partner in all things, and knew without a doubt that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Home, not just a place, but a person. He was her home, and she was his, and together they had created something that would last long after they were gone. The cowboy had said he had room for all 3 of them, and he had made good on that promise. He had given them not just a place to stay, but a place to belong. Not just shelter, but home. Not just survival, but life, full and rich and overflowing with love. And as Hannah finally headed inside to put the younger children to bed, Benjamin beside her and their family all around them, she sent up a silent prayer of thanks for broken wagon wheels and kind strangers and second chances, for the life she had been given, the love she had found, and the family she had built. It was, she thought as she tucked Daniel into his bed and kissed his soft cheek, more than enough. It was everything, and she was grateful for every single moment of it.